You think an avoidant person doesn't feel anything? Wait until you do the one thing that melts every wall they've built. There's a strange moment that shows up in almost every connection with an avoidant person. A moment where you feel something shifting beneath the surface, but you can't fully describe it. They're there with you, but a part of them stays slightly out of reach. They care, but they never completely lean into the connection. And right when you feel like you finally understand how they work, they pull back into their quiet emotional shelter again. It feels confusing, sometimes even personal, but it isn't personal at all. What you're actually stepping into is a psychological pattern they've carried for years, long before you ever entered their life. The truth is, avoidants don't bond the same way most people do. Their attachment doesn't move in a smooth, simple line. Their closeness grows slowly, in layers, built like a puzzle that someone else has to gently and patiently put together. And once you understand this pattern, their behavior stops looking cold and starts looking deeply human, even tender in its own complicated way. Here's the part almost nobody realizes. Avoidants actually feel connection far earlier than they show it. But the second they sense emotional intensity rising, their body sends them a signal that feels like a warning. Protect yourself. So instead of moving closer, they back up a little to observe you from a safer emotional distance. Not because they don't care, but because caring too much feels overwhelming and dangerous to them. Their nervous system doesn't interpret closeness the same way. For them, closeness equals risk, exposure, and the possibility of losing themselves. This slow bonding process isn't a sign of low interest. It's their way of testing emotional safety without revealing their fragile parts too quickly. They need steady emotional energy, warmth that doesn't fluctuate, and reassurance that they won't disappear into the relationship. Only then do they take the next tiny step forward. What seems like emotional distance is actually a defense they learned long before they knew what love or attachment even meant. And what looks like hesitation is their inner world wrestling with fear and desire at the same time. The real mystery isn't why avoidants bond slowly. The real surprise is how deeply they attach once trust is finally steady in their body. Avoidants don't warm up the way most people do. Their emotional process is slow, layered, and often invisible to anyone watching from the outside. While many people move toward connection through shared experiences and closeness, avoidants warm up through something quieter, internal safety signals. Their emotional world works like a frozen landscape that only softens under very specific conditions, and unless those conditions are met, nothing, not affection, not patience, not effort, will push them forward. Their system cannot fake warmth. It only opens when it feels secure. The first stage of an avoidant warming up doesn't even look like warmth. It looks like distance. It looks like stepping back. But they're not stepping back to disconnect. They're stepping back to observe. They want to know. Are you steady? Are you safe? Do you want closeness without controlling me? Will you honor the space I need without making it about you? If the answers feel like yes, something tiny inside them softens. Their guard drops by just a fraction of a percent, almost unnoticeable but very real. Then comes the micro-opening phase. They begin sharing small pieces of themselves, a simple personal preference, a childhood story slipped into a conversation, a vulnerable opinion they've never shared before. These tiny disclosures are not random comments. They are quiet emotional tests. They want to see your reaction. If you respond with acceptance instead of pressure, the ice melts a little more. If you hold space for them instead of pushing for more, they trust you a little deeper. Avoidants warm up when they feel they can be seen without being demanded from. When emotional presence is offered without expectations, they start coming closer in their own slow but sincere way. Next, their tone softens without them trying. Their body language loosens. They listen longer. They stay in conversations a little more than they usually would. They don't rush to leave or create distance. They check on you in subtle, gentle ways, not through dramatic actions, but through small, thoughtful moments. Did you get home safe? Did you eat? How was your day? These small signals carry huge meaning for an avoidant. They are not just warming up. They are quietly welcoming you into a part of their heart they keep shut from almost everyone. As their emotional comfort grows, something beautiful begins to happen. They start mirroring your energy, not to impress you, but because they finally feel secure enough to match the intimacy you offer. This is when their warmth becomes real. This is where their inner ice begins to turn into a calm, steady flame. Their emotional presence becomes fuller. They start initiating more conversations. They open up about things you never expected them to share. The connection stops feeling one-sided and starts feeling grounded, mutual, alive. And then, when their walls melt enough, avoidants do something incredibly rare. They allow themselves to be influenced by you. Your tone affects them. Your words stay with them. Your silence matters. Your presence brings them comfort. Your absence leaves a quiet ache. When this shift happens, the emotional thaw is complete. Their heart no longer hides behind safety walls. They let themselves feel you and be affected by you. Avoidants don't warm up fast. They warm up slowly, quietly, and with deep caution. But when they finally open, their warmth is not casual or temporary. It is real, selective, meaningful, and profoundly genuine. They love in a way that feels steady, loyal, and deeply rooted, because they do not give their heart unless they feel you are someone who will protect the space inside them that they've spent a lifetime guarding. What looks like distance in the beginning becomes devotion once trust settles in. What looks like hesitation transforms into emotional presence, and the same person who once stepped back now steps forward with a sincerity that can surprise you. Their slow bonding is not a flaw. It is a different emotional rhythm, and when you learn to understand it, you see that avoidants are not cold. They are careful. They are not uninterested. They are afraid of losing their inner balance. And they are not incapable of closeness. They are simply waiting to feel safe enough to stay open. This is the hidden truth behind their behavior. Avoidants don't attach quickly, but when they finally trust, their attachment is deep, steady, and real. They don't rush into love, but when they do let love in, they offer a connection that feels honest, grounded, and quietly powerful. They don't show emotion loudly, but they feel intensely. And when you become someone whose presence feels safe in their nervous system, everything begins to change. Their walls soften, their heart steadies, their warmth appears, and they no longer retreat. They slowly, intentionally choose you. Avoidants do not build attachment through romance, intense emotions, or dramatic moments the way many people think. They bond in a very different way, a way that is quiet and slow, something that grows through emotional safety that sneaks up on them without warning. Their hidden attachment switches on when they feel a connection that is calm, steady, gentle, and free from pressure. They do not respond to emotional demands or someone trying to pull closeness out of them. They respond to emotional stability, to someone who can offer peace instead of intensity and presence instead of pressure. One of the first major triggers for an avoidant to feel attachment is predictable presence. When someone shows up with consistency, not trying to push intimacy, not trying to demand closeness, it softens the avoidant's defenses. Their guard drops slowly because the connection does not feel like a threat to their independence. They start to realize, often without even noticing it consciously, that this connection does not endanger their sense of self. Instead, it gives them space to breathe, to exist without fear, and to stay connected in a way that feels safe. This slow, steady presence becomes a type of emotional anchor for them. The second powerful trigger is non-reactive emotional energy. Avoidants feel safest with someone who does not panic when they pull back, does not chase them when they ask for space, and does not guilt-trip them for needing distance. This kind of emotional steadiness makes them feel understood and respected at the same time. It tells them, you can be yourself here. You can step back and come forward without being punished. This is a rare feeling for them, because they were often raised in environments where closeness meant pressure, emotional chaos, or expectations they could not handle. So when they meet someone who allows them to regulate themselves without fear, they slowly begin to trust. Another deep trigger is being accepted without performance. Avoidants often feel like they have to act confident, strong, or independent just to be worthy of love. They believe they must present a certain image to earn connection. But when they meet someone who does not require that mask, someone who accepts them even in their quiet, unsure, or softer moments, something inside them melts. This acceptance touches the parts of them that learn to suppress their attachment needs. It awakens a longing they have buried for years. It is not dramatic on the outside, but internally, it is one of the deepest shifts they can experience. And then comes the strongest trigger of all: quiet, emotional intimacy. This is not intense passion or overwhelming closeness. It is the kind of connection built through calm conversations, gentle understanding, shared silences, subtle acts of kindness, and the effortless feeling of being around someone who does not drain them. Avoidants attach when someone makes them feel safe enough to let their real self come forward without fear of judgment, pressure, or emotional chaos. Their attachment does not explode. It unfolds slowly, deeply, and unmistakably. Avoidants live in a quiet contradiction. They crave deep emotional closeness just as much as anyone else, but the moment intimacy becomes too real, fear rises inside them like an alarm. This fear is not about the person they care for. It is about what closeness represents to them. To an avoidant, closeness feels like losing control, losing personal freedom, and being exposed in ways they were never taught to handle safely. Deep down, they want genuine connection, meaningful communication, and effortless emotional warmth. But their nervous system learned early that closeness can bring overwhelm, expectations they cannot meet, or emotional chaos. So when intimacy becomes deep, their body reacts before their mind has time to think. Their fight or flight system activates, and the safest path for them becomes distance. They step back not because they do not care, but because they suddenly feel too much. What they fear is not love itself. What they fear is being consumed by someone else's needs, or being so open that hurt becomes unavoidable. Vulnerability feels dangerous because it asks them to reveal the soft parts they have protected for years. And still, beneath all of this fear, the craving for connection never goes away. They long for someone who understands their need for space, someone who does not take their distance personally, someone who lets closeness grow slowly and naturally. Avoidants fear closeness, but they ache for connection that does not cost them their sense of self. When an avoidant finally locks onto someone, it does not happen with fireworks. It happens quietly, internally, and often without them realizing it at first. This moment is when their emotional system stops resisting the connection and begins depending on it. The shift is subtle but extremely powerful. You move from being just another person to becoming someone whose presence soothes them and whose absence unsettles them. You become part of their emotional safety system. The locking in begins the moment they feel consistently safe in your energy. Safe enough that their defenses do not need to stay active. They start thinking about you during ordinary moments of the day. They notice how your presence helps them relax, how your voice or your messages reduce their stress. They begin trusting you with thoughts or emotions they rarely share with anyone else. You may notice they start initiating more often, texting first, planning time together, checking in, or showing protective behaviors. These actions might seem small, but for an avoidant, they are signs of emotional investment. Each small action is a step deeper into the bond. Over time, emotionally, they begin to feel anchored to you. You become part of their inner world, a steady presence, a calming influence, a voice they carry with them even in your absence. Even if they still need space at times, the bond is already formed. When an avoidant locks onto someone, it becomes a deep, selective attachment that is incredibly difficult for them to replace. This kind of bond does not come lightly for them. It is rare, precious, and meaningful. Avoidants rarely show their emotions openly, but when their attachment deepens, subtle signs begin to appear, small, quiet behaviors that reveal their growing investment. Understanding these signs helps you see that their bond is strengthening even if they still act reserved. One of the first signs is consistent attention. They begin checking in more regularly, not because they feel obligated, but because your presence matters to them. Their curiosity about your thoughts, feelings, and daily life becomes intentional. They want to know you, not to control you, but to connect with you. Another indicator is emotional mirroring. Avoidants often reflect your moods and energy without realizing it. This mirroring shows that their brain is beginning to treat your feelings as important. They become attuned to your emotional world. You may also notice small acts of care, doing things for you without being asked, remembering details you mentioned days ago, or anticipating your needs in subtle ways. These gestures are not manipulative or performative. They are sincere expressions of their growing attachment. Vulnerability in small doses is another important sign. Avoidants may begin to share personal stories, fears, childhood memories, or past experiences in small, cautious steps. These openings might be brief, but they are meaningful. They show deep trust. Another surprising sign is how their absence affects them. They may still pull away at times, but now, when they do, the space feels different. They feel your absence more heavily than before. They think about you even when they are trying not to. This invisible emotional tether is quiet but strong. Their mind drifts toward you often, showing that the attachment has taken root. Deepening attachment in avoidance is rarely loud or dramatic. It is subtle, steady, and quietly powerful. One of the most confusing things they do is pull away just when connection seems strongest. To others, this looks like rejection or disinterest, but it is actually a mix of fear and self-protection. When intimacy peaks, their nervous system interprets closeness as a threat, not to the relationship, but to their independence. Avoidants often learn that deep emotional exposure can bring overwhelm or abandonment. So when the feelings become strong, their instinct is to step back and create space. This pullback is not them rejecting you. It is a way for them to manage the intensity of what they feel. They retreat to regulate their emotions. Another reason for pulling away is their fear of disappointment or abandonment. They know they feel deeply, sometimes more deeply than they admit, and taking space helps them stay in control. Despite the distance, their attachment does not fade. They still think about you. They still feel connected. They still notice your presence and absence. They often return once their emotions settle. When an avoidant forms a deep attachment, it does not show through loud declarations. It reveals itself through subtle patterns. One sign is consistent, low-pressure presence. They might not shower you with affection, but they show up in small ways: messages, calls, thoughtful gestures. Another sign is careful observation. They start noticing your routines, moods, and preferences without you explaining them. This is not control, it is connection. They want to understand you without overwhelming you. They also show emotional mirroring, reflecting your feelings and moods because their brain begins syncing with yours. Another sign is subtle protection or support, small actions that show they care about your well-being. These behaviors may seem tiny on the surface, but inside they are deep signals of emotional attachment. This is how avoidants love: quietly, carefully, deeply, and with a level of loyalty they rarely speak aloud. Remembering the small details, anticipating your needs before you even speak, or quietly standing up for you when you are not around are all powerful signals. People who carry avoidant tendencies rarely show these gestures loudly, but they express them in steady, consistent ways that reveal genuine care beneath their calm surface. They may not make big declarations, but their actions reveal more than their words ever could. Over time, you start to see the pattern. They notice what matters to you. They remember things you mentioned only once. They look out for you in subtle ways you don't always catch in the moment. These are not random habits. These are signs that you matter to them more than they will ever openly admit. And finally, they hold on to you mentally even when distance grows. Your presence does not disappear from their inner world simply because life gets busy or space appears between you. They think about you in quiet moments, replay conversations, remember how you made them feel, and carry those pieces with them. Your absence is not empty for them. It echoes. It weighs on their heart in a way they do not talk about. This is how you know the connection runs deeper than words or outer behavior. Intense attachment in an avoidant person is quiet, selective, and incredibly real once you learn how to recognize it. When someone with avoidant patterns forms a true emotional bond, it creates an imprint that lasts far beyond the relationship itself. What makes this connection unforgettable is not loud displays of affection or constant attention. It is the depth, sincerity, and authenticity behind the way they attach. Avoidants do not bond with everyone. When they choose someone emotionally, it happens rarely and with great caution. So when they finally open up, even a little, the weight and meaning of that openness is something most people never get to experience from them. This is why their love feels so unique. They are not open by default. They open because something in you touched something in them, something real, something their defenses could not push away. One major factor that makes the connection unforgettable is the combination of deep emotional presence and careful restraint. They may not overwhelm you with affection, but they feel things strongly. Their care shows in their attention, in their long silences that are filled with meaning, in the small, thoughtful actions that hold real weight. This mix of presence and restraint creates a feeling of safety, depth, and emotional gravity. You feel valued without being smothered. You feel seen without being consumed. You feel chosen without having to fight for it. Another reason the connection leaves such a lasting mark is their selective vulnerability. Sharing personal fears, past wounds, shame, or emotional struggles does not come easily to them. Avoidants have learned to protect their hearts by staying private and controlled. So when they reveal something personal to you, it is a powerful sign of trust. It shows that they see you as someone safe, someone worthy of their truth, someone who will not use their vulnerability against them. This kind of openness is rare for them, and because it is rare, it makes the bond unforgettable. You feel honored, chosen, and valued in a way that stays with you long after the moment has passed. The bond is also unforgettable because avoidants remember deeply. Even when time passes or distance appears, their internal attachment remains. They hold on to the memory of your energy, your words, your laugh, the way you made them feel, the conversations that touched them, and the small details that most people would forget. They replay moments quietly. They think about what they didn't say. They carry you in the background of their mind long after the connection changes. This lasting internal imprint is one of the strongest indicators of their deep emotional bond. They may not chase, but they do not forget. They may not express everything, but you remain significant inside them. This combination of selective closeness, deep trust, and a lasting emotional imprint makes a connection with an avoidant person rare, intense, and unforgettable. Understanding avoidance is not about pressuring them or trying to force closeness. It is about recognizing their unique emotional design and allowing things to unfold at a pace that feels safe for both of you. The truth is that avoidants bond slowly, not because they lack feelings, but because their feelings are strong enough to scare them. Once you understand this, their behavior makes sense. Their distance, their silence, their pullbacks, and their hesitation stop feeling like rejection. Instead, you see them for what they are: fear, not disinterest; protection, not detachment; caution, not lack of care. This shift in perspective creates empowerment. You no longer feel the need to chase them or constantly decode their emotions. You stop trying to manipulate situations or guess what they feel behind their silence. Instead, you focus on creating an environment of trust, patience, and emotional grounding. When you honor your needs while respecting their pace, the connection naturally becomes deeper and more secure. You allow them to come forward in their own time, and in return, they feel safe enough to open their heart more than they ever have. Another important part of understanding avoidant attachment is recognizing your own value. When you understand their emotional patterns, you learn how to stay grounded in your self-worth. You participate in the connection without losing yourself. You can separate their fear-driven distance from your sense of value. Their pullbacks stop determining how you see yourself. Their hesitation no longer dictates your confidence. You gain clarity. You gain emotional strength. You understand that their behavior is about their internal struggles, not about your adequacy. Remember that a connection with an avoidant is intense because it is selective. It is meaningful because it is rare. It is powerful because it requires trust. And it becomes transformative because it pushes both people to grow emotionally. By understanding their psychology, you give yourself the insight to navigate the connection with patience, clarity, compassion, and inner strength. You turn frustration into understanding. You turn confusion into awareness. You turn uncertainty into transformation. When you see the dynamic clearly, the entire experience becomes less about pain and more about emotional truth for both hearts. You learn to meet them where they are while still standing firmly in your own worth. And from that place, something real can grow, something steady, meaningful, and unforgettable. And through this process, you also begin to understand the deeper layers of your own emotional needs. You notice what parts of the connection trigger old wounds, which parts awaken your desire for closeness, and which parts teach you patience. An avoidance slow bonding reveals your strengths, your vulnerabilities, and your evolving emotional maturity. Their pauses teach you not to rush. Their silence teaches you to listen to your own intuition. Their fear teaches you how to stay steady without losing yourself. Their gradual closeness teaches you that meaningful bonds are built, not forced. In time, you recognize that both people are navigating their own emotional histories. They are protecting their heart out of old experiences. You are seeking connection from your own stories. When both sides understand this, the relationship becomes less about frustration and more about mutual growth. You realize you do not have to fix them, and they realize they do not have to run from you. Closeness becomes a shared journey instead of a battle. Trust grows slowly but strongly. Emotional presence starts replacing old fears. This is why a bond with an avoidant is unforgettable. It is not casual. It is not shallow. It is not something they give easily. It is something rare, something felt deeply, something carried quietly but powerfully. When they choose to let someone in, it is because that person mattered to them in a way they could not ignore. And that is why the emotional imprint lasts. It becomes a connection that shapes both hearts, bringing awareness, strength, patience, and emotional truth that stay with you long after the moment has passed.